the continuation of our Thursday, January 26, 2021, Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting. We are at item 12 in our agenda, Public Works. 12A, discussion, potential transportation and growth management community assistance opportunity for Blue River Community Plan. We have with us several people, including Amber Bell. And Ms. Bell, I would ask you to introduce your group and take it away, please.
Thank you, Chair Bernie, Vice Chair Farr. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks. I was having a little bit of audio issues there, so I wanted to make sure. Amber Bell, Planning Director. Today with me is Patrick Wingard, Department of Land Conservation and Development Regional Representative, as well as Laura Buell, and she is with the Transportation and Growth Management Program with the LCD. Also on the call from the county is Austin Ramirez, Community and Economic Development Manager, Alex Kyler, Intergovernmental Relations Manager, and Lindsay Eichner, Principal Planner. Today, we are before you to request board direction on whether or not staff should pursue a potential transportation and growth management community assistance opportunity that, if secured, would provide resources to begin a new long-range or comprehensive planning effort for the community of Blue River. We have just a brief presentation for you, and then we'll be available for the remainder of our time this afternoon to answer any questions that you may have. So prior to the Holiday Farm Fire, there has been a history of community development and long-range planning efforts for the rural unincorporated community of Blue River. There's been an acknowledgement of a lack of a downtown district or community gathering place along the McKenzie River in the valley. Goal 2, Policy 15 in our Lane County Rural Comprehensive Plan calls out specific long-range planning options for Blue River, specifically for planning of subsurface sanitation or septic system facilities. Those options include a plan for maintaining and repairing existing on-site sewage disposal systems, or developing a public facility plan for a public sewer and fully complying with the unincorporated communities rule, or as a more aggressive and long-term strategy, incorporation. In 2015, a team of Hatfield Fellows, along with economic development from the county and a specialist from the Rural Community Assistance Corporation, evaluated the feasibility of building a community sewer system and enabling more redevelopment in the community. That report, however, identified several obstacles or hurdles with developing a community sewer system and creating a more urban level of development in the rural area of Blue River. Since that time, county staff and other agencies have continued to meet with community members, even as recently as August 2020. And as Lane County moves from response to the recovery stage of the disaster, the Holiday Farm Fire, attention is now being given to the Blue River Community Plan concept. As you are all aware, Blue River was hit exceptionally hard by the fire. If we could possibly pull up, we have a map showing the number of structures that were destroyed in the community of Blue River compared with the number of addresses in the community. I'm not sure we're able to pull that up right now, but in any event, we've compared the number of structures that were destroyed in the community of Blue River with the overall area that was impacted by the Holiday Farm Fire, and compared with the overall area that experienced still a very high amount of damaged structures or destroyed structures, about 70%, but in Blue River, there was about 87% destroyed or damaged structures. So it experienced an exceptional amount of damage, as you are all aware. But I wanted to provide those numbers for some context. So the fire brought new challenges for the community, and in some ways that now presents an opportunity and a reason to embark on some future comprehensive planning efforts to support community redevelopment. Patrick and others at DLCD staff have been instrumental in helping us navigate and pursue this potential TGM community assistance opportunity that would support us to hire a consultant that would partner with the county, and if secured, we would be able to explore the feasibility of drafting a newly envisioned and complete Blue River community plan. It would fully implement the unincorporated communities rule, not only for Blue River, but also potentially other developed and committed exception areas in the county. Those are like the rural residential zone, the rural industrial zone, the rural commercial zone. And also weave in TGM objectives into the plan, such as compact urban and transit-oriented development, as well as essentially resilient planning principles. We also understand this effort could potentially receive support from a monetary business Oregon commitment to complete a study for a prospective wastewater treatment facility. And it may dovetail with a feasibility study to reevaluate a transfer of development rights programs that could redirect development entitlements from more high-risk, non-conforming, transportation inefficient, or environmentally sensitive areas to a potentially denser community. So I invite Patrick to join and share any additional info that you may like to, Patrick, regarding, or Laura, about the TGM opportunity and the complete Blue River Community Plan concept at this time.
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry, Chair.
You're fine.
Thanks. This is Patrick Wingard. I'm with Department of Land Conservation Development. You all hear me okay? I can't see myself. You're nodding. Okay, great. Hey, good afternoon, commissioners. Great to be here with you. I'll be very brief and then perhaps hand the floor to my colleague, Laura Buell from the Transportation Growth Management Program. You made it easy for me. As soon as the fires occurred, I read your comprehensive plan, your natural hazard mitigation plan, and I could clearly see that Blue River was teed up for some additional work. In fact, I've learned now through Amber that you all had on your somewhat outmoded but still valid periodic review work plan to implement the unincorporated communities rule. So I'm really pleased that this project might be able to not only inform future zoning and land use activities in Blue River, but maybe it can help to inform some of your other unincorporated communities as well. So I think Amber did a great job covering the main points. Happy to answer any questions, and then I'll give the floor to Laura in case Laura wants to say a few words. Thank you.
I think we will reserve questions until the presentation is complete. You're muted, Laura. I'm so sorry, we can't hear you. But we can see a map.
So I'm going to try to jump in here for Laura. I'm not sure what she was going to speak to, but I'll just share with you all how the Transportation Growth Management Program got involved. After the wildfires occurred, it was obvious that we had needs all over the state. And it was actually Talent in Phoenix, the cities that reached out to us first, asking for some code assistance help. Hey, do you guys have anybody on staff that can help us update some codes? And yes, we have Laura Buell, who's dedicated to the Transportation Growth Management Program. Well, that conversation expanded, and as soon as I learned that we could potentially deploy some TGM resources, I grabbed Laura's attention and said, hey, I think I've got a good project here in Lane County that we could really not only meet some transportation growth management objectives, but really help this community, help the county get back on its feet. And that's my attempt at covering the TGM part of this.
If I may, Chair Bernie.
Certainly, because I know everyone's having some communication issues right now, so please.
Sure. So again, our request today of the board is, we would greatly appreciate any direction that you may be able to provide on whether to proceed with this TGM opportunity. And with that ask, again, we're available to answer any questions that the board may have about this conceptual project.
Well, I want to thank everyone for doing the best under sort of stressed circumstances with communication. However, at this time, based on this presentation, are there any board members that wish to ask questions or make comments? Commissioner Buck.
I don't necessarily have any questions because I've been involved in these conversations with staff and community and DLCD, everybody who's participated. It has my full support. I know that there are various different aspects that are all kind of coming together here recently. And this is one of those key cogs in the wheel that we need in order to help the community recover. So I would really urge my fellow commissioners to support this and keep it moving along so that when resources do come back into the community, which we know will happen, that we have these things in place so that when rebuilding happens, it happens not only in the right method that helps the community recover, but also what's necessary to support ongoing resources that could come into the community, whether they be state or federal. And we can show that we have our ducks in a row. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there another commissioner that would like to speak at this time? Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. So my only question is how does floodplain complicate some of this? Blue River, particularly quite a few of the structures that were destroyed, have floodplain identified where they are. Is that going to be a problem as we try and go through this growth management plan and statewide goals around that, and trying to reestablish the community as it was versus, the fact that most of downtown Blue River is in floodplain? I'm not quite sure going through this process is going to, how that might impact those folks that lost structures in floodplain.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so sorry for jumping in. This is Laura. The structures that are in floodplains will be in the floodplain whether this project is done or not, and the existence of the floodplain will certainly be taken into account during the project. I don't have enough data to say what that means exactly, but the floodplain will be taken into account.
Commissioner Farr. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Bozovich, were you not through?
Just was saying thank you.
I didn't mean to preempt a thank you, sir. I'm sorry. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Like Commissioner Buck, I welcome the additional resources, the additional expertise that's going to help us move through. It's something that Mr. Wingard said is that the work that's being done in Blue River can be informative to other communities in Lane County. To me, that's an exciting element of it, that we can do things in Blue River that really can be transferred down the road into other communities as we have an opportunity with basically I hate to say a blank slate in Blue River, but really a ground up development. My cat is attacking me. Sorry, got a rogue animal in here. Doesn't like what I'm saying. Just a single question that I have, and once again, Mr. Wingard, thank you for that particular element. That you know, we have other communities similar size to Blue River in very different circumstances that can potentially will down the road benefit from the work that's happening right now, and the additional expertise is going to be absolutely beneficial. The question that I have is regarding the consultant. We anticipated this would cover the cost of the consultant. The selection of the consultant, that is in the hands of Lane County, I would hope and expect. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. In the case of transportation and growth management projects, the consultant is chosen by the Transportation and Growth Management program. Of course, we do take into account input from the local jurisdiction about, you know, whether they've had experience with a certain consultant and those types of things. But we are the selecting entity. I
see. And the only reason that I seem to pause a little bit on that is that Lane County, as a home rule county, we do value I hate to say control, but that is actually the word, the control of processes that occur inside of the county. Understanding that we are asking and receiving help from the state on this, but really, Ms. Buell, I don't think I'm alone in stating that, you know, we do value self-determination in the county as much as possible. And I do understand that selecting the consultant probably more economically, and I don't just mean about money economically, but time and effort economically in a central organization such as the LCD. So I'm not raising a flag that is unlowerable by any stretch of the imagination. Just to point out something that we always say, we do like Lane County as a home rule county. Thank you.
Chair Bernie, if I may respond to that a little bit more. I just wanted to also mention that, you know, if we successfully secure this TGM opportunity, community assistance opportunity, that would result in a package. Lane County planning staff would partner with TGM, whichever consultant is ultimately selected, on reviewing draft documents, draft plans, and then Lane County staff would ultimately bring anything before the community for their input, as well as before the Planning Commission and then the board for review and recommendation by the Planning Commission and a decision by the board.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. And really, I'd like to point out that I'm personally very thankful for the help that is being offered Ms. Buell and Mr. Wingard. Looking forward to the work we're going to do together. Thank you.
Are there any other commissioners that would like to speak on this or ask questions? Okay, seeing none, I would like to say that first, I absolutely support what Commissioner Buck stated, and actually what Commissioner Farr stated. I see I think philosophically, we have so much talent in our community. It's always nice, as much as we can, just as we are with the community benefit bidding protocol, to give priority to recycling dollars for expertise locally. That's just a philosophical point, and it does not preclude my absolute support for this moving forward. And I believe this is an interesting opportunity. Much as we're going to hear next week, I believe, of some of the unexpected impacts already with the community benefits protocol, this seems like another opportunity to build back better. My quote, that's not a political thing, it's just literally to build back better, and to do it in ways where we will be prepared. There are going to be dollars coming down from this new administration, and to the degree community states and have partnerships with selected communities in those states that have the capacity to move forward in rebuilding such as this, those areas are going to receive more than their fair share of initial dollars. And I think that all we can do is position our county to benefit from this. Amber, based upon the safeguards and the process that you articulated, bringing things back to us, I'm one of those shaking my head in the affirmative in terms of moving forward on this. Are there any other commissioners that would like to make any statements? We're at this odd point where it's discussion, you're looking for general direction, we're not voting. I welcome any commissioner to object, but my reading is that you have more than the majority of people supporting moving forward with this. Is that correct? Okay. Amber and others, is there any other feedback you want or need or information you want to provide at this time?
I don't believe at this time. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon and for the direction.
Thank you all very much for your time. We are now moving. Oh, I got so involved, I lost my place on the agenda, and we have a map in front of us. Excuse me. We are now moving to item 13A, County Administration. Is that correct? I believe it is. Yeah. A discussion, Oregon State University OSU Extension Service levy. Next steps. We have several people here, including Judy Williams and Cheryl Beshart. And would you please lead us in this discussion?
Morning. Sorry about that. I think I've got everything ready to go.
Bad news, it's afternoon.
This is 2021, right? Good afternoon, Chair Bernie, Commissioners. Judy Williams here, Strategy and Integration Manager. We're here to talk about the OSU Extension Service levy. With me, we have Cheryl Betchart, the County Clerk. We also have Richard Riggs with OSU Extension Service and Jillian Drews as well. So we planned a brief, like 15 minutes, maybe less presentation, kind of talk through history, overview, kind of next steps, and then would like to turn it over to you. So with that, it looks like you're able to see my screen okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. So just a very brief overview. I'll stop moving my screen. My apologies. Currently, we have an existing OSU Extension Service property tax levy in place, and that was approved by the voters in 2016. And so that does sunset in 2021. My role with this item is really to help be a liaison as OSU Extension Service has reached out, and I'm helping to coordinate staff with OSU Extension Service and help them through the process, the board processes through the next steps. So you may remember towards the end of last year, December 8th is when we kind of kicked off this item. And so we had a great presentation by staff, Jillian Drews and Richard Riggs, in terms of what type of revenue question they were hoping to bring forward to you. And so that is to be placed on the May 2021 ballot. And that's a temporary tax of 2.8 cents per 1,000 assessed value. And during that presentation on the 8th, they really walked through the impacts of the 2016 levy, touched on the 2020 remote programming and outreach services, really hitting, although it has been a non-normal year, 2020, that is, just really have been able to transform and engage their services to really help most people that are at home a lot more, working on food preservation, master gardener services, etc. They also touched on funding sources that they have, as well as what they had planned to propose for expansion of services with this increase. The current tax that's in place is 1.5 cents. and this would be an increase to 2.8 cents. And so they walked through what those would look like. The total revenue that was mentioned at that presentation would be bringing in about just over $1 million. On December 15th, we held a public comment session and had some good public comments in writing and in person. And so some of the next steps are walking this through. We don't have a requirement, because this is an odd number year with the measure going to the ballot. We don't have the requirement to have a voter's pamphlet. And so this isn't a year where that would be done. So some of the next steps are really, we would come back to you on February 9th to do the official referring of the levy to the ballot. So this is a meeting to have any other kind of questions. Are you on board with the next steps and processes? Is there anything else you'd like us to cover on the 9th and coming back to you? The other steps here are really a little bit more administrative in nature. So while we do need the board's approval to refer it to the ballot, some of the other steps are, on our radar in terms of getting it to the clerk on time, getting it to county council who prepares the forms on time, and following all of those procedures. And then finally, the last step on here is really, if the revenue question is successful, and if it's passed, then we have a 30-day timeline to have a intergovernmental agreement in place. And that's pretty common to have, how does the money transfer? The intergovernmental agreement just walks through a lot of the specifics. And so one of the items that we're hoping to have some discussion points and to hear your feedback on today are really, are you continuing to support us moving forward? Are there any questions? We are aware, I believe both Richard Riggs and Jillian have reached out to Commissioner Traeger, as we know that you had weren't able to attend some of the earlier conversations in December. So just wanted, it was full board support in 2020, and we just want to continue that discussion. And then, as I mentioned, the intergovernmental agreement where we can try and narrow down some of the specifics. We did want to bring this question to you about potentially sharing election costs. This is something that we've done in the past, and with that, I will turn it over to Cheryl to touch quickly on the cost side of things, and then we can turn it over to you for discussion.
Thank you, Judy. Chair Burney, commissioners, just wanted to quickly address the cost sharing, so it would give you a little bit of basis on how the election costs work. We expect to have, this is a district-wide election, so there are approximately 65 special districts that are already participating in this election and will share the costs for the election. Basic formulas are adopted by law and administrative rule. Essentially, the total cost of all the prices, everything that we formulate to conduct the election, which is your printing and postage, extra help, supplies, and a wide variety of things. We come up with that total, and then we divide it based on a formula that's been adopted by law, and it's shared based on the number of measures that are on the ballot, the number of positions that are on the ballot, and the district registration. So that those numbers are all put in a formula to determine what the price is for each of those districts and what their responsibilities will be for reimbursing the county. And at this time, the expected amount for the election for a county measure to be on the ballot is estimated at $22,000 to $28,000. And of course, we are still far in advance of the filing deadline, so we don't have that information as far as the number of measures. We're expecting possibly 3 measures that I'm aware of. And then the number of positions right now is estimated at 200 candidate positions that will be open for filing. So that all depends on some statutory deadlines that are approaching us as we enter February. So that's what I have to offer on the election costs. Thank you very much.
And just a point of clarification, this morning you heard from the sheriff, and we talked about the public safety district levy. There's a difference here in terms of while it's a district, that there is that requirement that the district would cover the costs. And so in this instance, because it's not a service district, it's not spelled out in lane code. And so past practice has been, in order to help cover some of those costs, this is what was worked into the agreement in 2016 when it passed to help pay for those election costs. But I just wanted to give you the opportunity to talk through that, just so there were no surprises with that. So that's all that we had to do in terms of presentation. There's other folks here if you have any other specific questions, but just seeking if there's still approval moving forward, anything that you need us to bring back for you when we discuss the actual referral on the 9th. I will turn it over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Judy. I'm wrestling on Ms. Williams. Thank you very much. Before we begin, only because I see on my screen that Mr. Riggs is here, do you have anything to say? Or are you a resource person to ask questions of?
Thank you, Chair Bernie, and board members appreciate it. And again, we appreciate partnering with you guys on this effort. I do have a question about the cost, probably to Cheryl. If there are 3 ballot measures that are referred, would the 3 ballot measure referees then split that $22,000 to $28,000 cost? Is that how that works? Or I mean, we're happy to pay our fair share for sure. I'm just curious of what that fair share may be.
Judy, Cheryl, do you have an answer for Richard or no?
I may turn it, for some reason my sound skipped during all of what Mr. Riggs had said. So I know there might have been a cost question. I'm getting sound now, so if you want to repeat it, or if Cheryl, if you caught that and can respond.
Okay. Richard, I think we'll get there with our questions. And if we don't, keep us honest. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments at this juncture? Vice Chair Farr.
Just maybe an observation. I think Sheriff Harold gave us a timeline as far as form submission and all of those things. I'm presuming it's the same timeline for deadlines that the sheriff gave us this morning. No answer needed on that, really. That's immaterial.
Okay. Do any commissioners have any other? Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. See, he makes sure I see him when he. Thank you, sir.
I just, 2 things. First, I just want to express my support for moving forward, and on the basis that we did in 2016 with the cost sharing. But I want to kind of re-ask Richard's question because maybe Cheryl can hear us now and Judy. That if there are other measures on the ballot, will they be splitting the cost of that 22 to 28,000, or is that 22 the low end if there's more measures on, and 28 if there's only one? What that cost sharing between other measures, how's that work?
Chair Bernie, Commissioners, I can address that. So basically, we are putting the expenses into a formula, and it will be divided up as far as if there's 2 county measures, it'll be divided up on the 2. $1 amount that'll go to the county, and then it will be the county's responsibility to work with the extension service on what portion they would like to have them be reimbursed. So as far as the election side, I'm just going to say the county, 2 measures, this is your portion, if that helps.
Thank you, and I think that answered Richard's question for him.
Commissioner Trieger, if you can hear us, would you like to speak now? Commissioner Trieger? Oops, okay. Different of us, I'm getting texts, are having issues hearing. So are there any other commissioners that would like to make a statement here? Commissioner Buck.
I'll also just reiterate my support on this measure too, and the cost sharing is fine with me as well. I look forward to seeing this on the ballot.
I think Commissioner Treater is having difficulties hearing.
She has stated that she's in and out. Out right now is the text I just received.
It's back in. It's been very spotty. It's apparently a go-to-meeting problem. I've been texting with.
We're all going to be quiet because we can hear you now, Commissioner. I know you have something to say.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry to have missed bits and pieces of the presentation, but I caught enough of the essence of it. And honestly, without the presentation, I could make these comments. And they are how much I have been for years an appreciator of what Extension does. And in fact, as a new commissioner, I'm enrolled in something called County College, and our presentation last week was the entire day was devoted to learning about Extension. And I've been a fan of and know about Extension for years and didn't understand the depth and breadth of programming that Extension services provide to people across Oregon. I've been primarily familiar with, involved in the nutrition education programs, the master gardening, the master recycler programs. And I think it's so important that we support this and do everything like we can to help the community understand why these programs are important, not just because of how they improve quality of life for so many people, but because of how interconnected they are. It's a great example of maximizing benefit for a very small investment. For example, when we support Master Gardener and Master Recycling programs, we're helping meet some of our climate goals. When we support programs around positive youth development, we're supporting reducing the number of people in our criminal justice system by giving kids a better start. When we support these food and nutrition programs, and especially with COVID right now, with more people than ever using food bank services and enrolling in the SNAP program, we're increasing people's self-sufficiency, their stability, their resiliency, and their health and the health outcomes. So to me, supporting Extension and helping advocate for funding for programs like Extension is easy. And I'm really appreciative of everyone who's worked to present to us, and looking forward to helping support and educating our community about why this matters. I think so many people are benefiting from Extension programs and they don't know it's an Extension service that they're benefiting from. So thank you for the presentation.
I just want to say that given that 4 out of 5 of us supported this a year and a half ago, and that and our new commissioners indicated her support, and you were more than generous when this body was going for a bond for the courthouse, because your intent was to be on that same ballot. So I enthusiastically support this. I want to say 2 things though. One, I wish there weren't already 4 commissioners that supported this, because I want to say I'll only support if you do more solar, but I don't get to say that. I can say it, it'll carry no weight. And 2, simply because this is the first time we, or at least I, have had the opportunity to see and speak with you, Ms. Betchard. I just want to say congratulations and hats off to the unbelievable job you did with the last election. And the logistics of that and the people that were involved in that. No, seriously. Thank you, Vice Chair. I just wanted to say that because we don't get that chance very often. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If there are no further comments, it sounds to me like it's a full-throated go forth and let's secure this for the Extension service if we possibly can with our community. Very good. Cheryl, Judy, Richard, anything else before this body moves on to our next item?
Thank you. And I'll be happy to talk to you about solar power some other time, Chair Bernie.
Good, because I was in a plane. Oh, it's over. Okay. I'll hold that comment. We are now on item 13B, announcements. Are there any announcements from any commissioners or from Mr. Mokrahajski or staff?
Thanks, Chair. So I do have a couple items. I wanted to, I think Sarai Johnson is with us, and I promised this morning that we would give an update on West 11th and Beltline and the camp that we've been dealing with there. And then I also have a brief update on the MAT clinic project. So I think Sarai is with us, and I'd like to take the 11th and Beltline discussion first. I'll just say briefly as an introduction that this has come up in prior board meetings. Commissioner Farr has raised questions just about that have come from the community about what's happening there and what supports. We've had other commissioners who have reached out and inquired about what's happening there. Lane County has been working with the city of Eugene and other partners to try to find out. We know that site is really not a good site for folks to be. Because of the lack of drainage and sort of the location along the highway there. So we have, and I know the board has also received some emails regarding the topic of sweeps. I want to just say that Lane County does not have a practice of sweeping people from camps. What we are doing, and we have been working on as it relates to, and there are two things in place here. One, we're generally committed to if we need to move individuals off a property that are camping at a property because it's not safe or it's just problematic from a health and safety standpoint, we always seek to find an alternative location for those folks to be. In addition, during the pandemic, we have followed the CDC's guidance to really not try to disrupt folks that are camping in places, because we don't want to be moving these camps around and causing more disruption and impact on health and safety in the middle of a pandemic. So we've been sensitive and continue to be sensitive about those issues. As it relates to this particular camp on West 11th, we've heard from residents and businesses in the area. We know that it's been concerning and problematic, and we've really looked to try to find alternative locations for people to more safely be. So Sarai can talk a little bit about what we're doing on that front, but I just wanted to generally provide some comments around those concerns about sweeps, which we don't participate in, and then really our efforts to try to find a better solution for folks in the middle of this pandemic. So Sarai, are you there? Can you fill in some of the details?
Yeah,
for the board?
gladly. Indeed, I am here. Thank you, Mr. Mokrahajski. Thank you, Chair Bernie, and commissioners. It's nice to see you all today. So as a kind of continuing that update, what we've been working on for a long time, admittedly, is making sure that we have the ability to relocate the folks who are living out at 11th and Beltline, preferably as a cohort, to places where they will be able to stay until there's places for people to live, or until we have to switch around where microsites and rest stops are for whatever reason. So what we have been able to finally do is identify 3 county-owned properties that are located in a couple of different neighborhood associations, backyards, if you will, and have reached out to those neighborhood associations to begin the conversation about these placements and the possibility for making sure that those go really well. The boards of those organizations have been supportive of these efforts, and so we expect to be able to work well with them in tandem to reach out to the direct neighbors of these sites. And then once that is complete, we also have the ability to start setting up the sites. At this time, what we're probably looking at is likely setting up microsites, which is structures of up to 6 structures on a site. Up to 2 people in the same household can occupy one of those structures. So about 6 to 10 people is typically the range of people who might be out there. Those will most likely be platform tents with canopies over them and a privacy fence, access to a portable restroom, hand washing station, and trash service. So These will also be managed. We don't have a provider in mind just yet, but the team in the Human Services Division is working on identifying existing contracts that could be expanded to include these microsites potentially, or perhaps kind of parsed out to different providers who are working in those specific areas. The next steps on this are to make those connections with neighbors. I'm pulling together a team of staff and also some volunteers, particularly those who are working with Occupied Medical and Black Thistle, who've made and maintained some good relationships with the campers who are at that site, conducting outreach with the campers to help them understand what the plan is and some timeline information, and then helping them prepare to move, while also then setting up the microsites, assisting the move for the campers, and then cleaning up the site. And we do plan to fence that site in the future because it isn't appropriate for camping at any time. It is on a Goal 5 waterway for the city and needs to be protected. So that's where we are right now. I think there's possibility to work with. There is a social service provider who does cleanups, probably could do some more work to get some of the trash removed from the site in the near term, rather than letting it sort of stay there. So I think we can do that before we officially move folks. The other good news is they do actually have access to a portable toilet, and I don't believe a hand washing station, but we can get them hand sanitizer, and street outreach is able to provide those kinds of resources to folks. So that's where we're at. If you have any questions, here I am.
Yes, I was going to ask if commissioners wanted to take Soraya up on her generous offer, Commissioner Farr.
Just to say thank you, Soraya. You've been working on this for several weeks now, and it's not easy in light of the fact that we cannot really disperse congregate camps by CHC guidelines. Doing a superb job. You've given me everything that I need when people ask me about it. It doesn't always satisfy them completely, but the people do understand that we are moving along at the rate that we can move along. So really, I have nothing critical to say other than, it is on a waterway, and the sooner we get people onto a drier place, it's actually going to be easier for them to big asphalt parking lots temporarily are just fine. And I know there are a few around town. It's a matter of, as you say, making sure they fit into the neighborhood and the regular use of that. I just have one question, and this, Chair Byrne, if you'll indulge me, is that a vinyl collection on those shorts behind you? If it is, that's pretty impressive.
It is indeed, yes. I do always have to do this full disclosure. They're not mine, they're my partners. I'm not that cool. So my collection is more like yarn.
That's okay, Sarai. We know your partner, and he is.
I know. That's why we're together, so I can get his coolness.
Thanks.
Sorry,
and thank you for working on this, because the work on West 11th doesn't only apply to that site at West 11th. It applies to the number of sites that are hovering around the urban growth boundary. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair Byrne. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for the report. And I'm just going to echo the appreciation for how hard you're working and how hard that work is, going out to the site, talking with folks, and then returning home at the end of the day to your own comfortable house. I know that's hard work. So thank you for doing that. I have a question, and then I have a request. And again, being new to the process, this might be better for future board assignment requests. But it also could be a question that I'm asking of Ms. Johnson, and then Chair, maybe you can tell me, let's push that out to the next item. My first question, just practically, you mentioned 3 identified potential sites to relocate folks at West 11th now. Do we need all 3 to come online before we move anybody, or might there be a sequence of basically diminishing the population at West 11th as 1, 2, or 3 of those sites come on board?
Yeah, that is definitely a possibility. I think phasing that is completely smart, and we really are looking to help people move as soon as possible.
Great, thank you for that. The other piece of it, and I appreciate in the introduction when Administrator Mokrajewski was speaking about a lot of the emails we've been getting about suites and how the city and county work together, and those are really city issues. So I'm looking forward to my first joint elected officials meeting where we can have this conversation with our partners at the city. But I do know the city has stepped up and done some work to do more advanced notification of suites to help give the residents of the camps and also service providers a little more heads up to prepare for those. So that's a small plus sign in the plus column. The piece that I want to ask about is, I know site management is an issue, but identifying sites, and Commissioner Farr referenced there's several paved parking lots and so on, and this is the piece that's either a question for you and or our next agenda item of maybe if the future board assignment request is, do we have a good inventory of what are the potential possible sites and the hurdles or barriers that we need to clear or address in order to use them? And then also a sort of dashboard and inventory of what we are doing currently, because the problem with this work is the successes are what's invisible. And so when community writes us about how big of a problem it is, not as a way to give an excuse and say we don't need to work hard because look what we're already doing, but I think it's important and instructive to be able to simply and readily point the community to all the successes we already have achieved, the number of sites, the number of people housed, the number of microsites, as well as our bigger infrastructure projects like the Commons on MLK and the new site that's just broken ground at 13th and Tyler. So any kind of inventory list dashboard of our progress along the way relative to the need, whether that's something that exists or could be created and what it would take to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Trieger. I can speak to the dashboard first, which since I'll go in backward order. The dashboard has definitely been one of the most important projects that we have on our plate, and it has been slow to move forward, largely because of, as you recall, 2020 was very exciting. So we will be doing that soon. Just as a sneak peek, the joint elected officials meeting will include some high-level work plan information, and from that work plan is where I plan to kind of draw that dashboard. So Devin Ashbridge with the county is on board to help with that. She's the designated PIO for TAC work at the county, and Laura Hammond at the City of Eugene is their designated person. So we'll be all working together and likely also tapping Jason Dedrick for a little bit of help on that too. So that is forthcoming. I hope to see it come online, let's say in the second quarter of this year is most likely the soonest it'll probably happen. And then as far as an inventory of land, we've addressed this a couple of different ways since I've been here, which is about a year now. The first time we did it, it was in partnership with the City of Springfield, county staff, and the City of Eugene to identify publicly owned lands in the metro area where people could go. As you mentioned, a large part of the challenge with siting is overcoming barriers. And so, you know, in this moment, we have a lot more urgency around this than we maybe realized would be the case at the very beginning of the COVID response, which is when we were talking about it before. So I do think that it's more possible for us to identify what those barriers are and how we can overcome them to utilize sites. Right now, we do have a small team working on that between the City of Eugene and the county. So we have our Public Works Director at the county, Dan Hurley, and our Public Works Director at the city, Matt Rodriguez, in that conversation, along with a few other folks, including myself, Greg Rickoff, and Christy Hammett, the Assistant City Manager. So we actually have a meeting once a week starting next week to continue to go over this and figure out where can people go. Ideally, if I might just add, part of this in my mind is that it will be ideal for us to identify locations where we can set up microsites or rest stops so that people can have a place to go if and when their camp is deemed inviolable.
Well, clearly, I've lost all control the more substantive the conversation is. No, this is great. Commissioner Trieger, I did not know if you were through or not.
That's it for now. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Are there any other commissioners with comments or questions?
I lied.
I just asked. Go ahead.
So I just looked down at my notes. With all the sound problems we were having before, I got all discombobulated. Another piece of that inventory, and again, Commissioner Chair Bernie, if this is for future board assignments, then we can bump it there. But I'm really curious about how much money the county is spending on this sort of reactive model And to be clear, not begrudging a dollar spent to keep people in more sanitary conditions and help them relocate. But from a bigger picture perspective, obviously financial resource is always an issue in addressing the needs of our unhoused neighbors, but we're already spending money on it. And it would be really instructive for me to think about, what does that look like and how we could in the future redirect comparable pots of money to more proactive or lasting solutions. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Ever so briefly, and Sarai, just remind everybody that you and I have been talking about this inventory for quite some time, and Steve Manella and others have been talking with me for quite some time about a complete inventory of all public land, and that's owned by the public, no matter which agency or which controlling agency has the land. And we have such an inventory, and it just needs to be applied into some form of a chart that lists the conditions surrounding using that. For instance, just down the street from me is Danaville Elementary School. Huge asphalt parking lot. It's not been used for months. Could we use it? Well, no, it's probably going to be used in a couple of months, we would hope. So, there are reasons for things to not be used, but at least have everything, we have everything in a place. It's just a matter of applying it to some form of a chart to make decisions as to why or why not we can't use it. We have Zumwalt Park, for instance, huge asphalt parking lot. Why can't we use it? Well, there's a list of reasons we can't use it. So, we have the inventory, it's there, it's just deciding why we can't use it.
Thank you.
Any other questions, statements, comments? I just want to ironically reiterate a couple of things Commissioner Trieger mentioned and Commissioner Farr. One is, this is the third, Sarai, not to you, in fact, maybe never to you, but this is the third time I'm going to mention also inventorying unused warehouse space that is more decentralized, not necessarily a central facility, that either for pennies on the dollar might be possible to rent, to be contributed temporarily to temporary housing for the unhoused. Mr. Mokers-Heisky will probably want to respond to this because he's been there each of the three times I've mentioned this. So I think that is another thing that could be inventoried, and it wouldn't be a difficult task, I don't believe, because I think commercial brokers would be very quick to want to demonstrate their civic engagement during. Also, dashboard. I'll look forward to that discussion. I've seen concepts. My experience with dashboards are they are hugely powerful, especially if located in places where the end user is seeing the dashboard, as opposed to just program people. Of course, my experience is with energy efficiency and energy creation and going into buildings and seeing dashboards, totally different application. I also, by the way, want to add to the voices commending you. I at first created some challenges with you, and you've risen to all of them, and you've communicated with everyone I've asked you to, and you've been great. And I, like Commissioner Trieger, I'm also looking forward to structural, proactive ways in which one day, hopefully, I pray to God while I'm in this position, we can get in front of this problem. And I think a federal recommitment to public housing will be part of that answer. Is there anyone else that would like to make any statements before Mr. Mokers-Heisky puts me in my place? It's all yours, Steve.
So, and I appreciate, thanks Sarai for the update. We mostly wanted the commissioners and the public to know that we've been actively working on this. These are really complex and sensitive challenges to deal with because they're people and they're residing in places that are not always safe and healthy. And so we need to find better alternatives. But those alternatives, and this is the tough part, oftentimes the solution looks easy and seems easy. We oftentimes hear, why do you have 40 acres at the fairgrounds? Why don't you just put everybody in the parking lots at the fairgrounds? Or, what about this site or that site, or buildings, commercial buildings and such. The challenge is when we actually start digging into those issues of siting it's actually the property and the structures are less the challenge. And oftentimes we're dealing with zoning or land use related restrictions. We're dealing with neighbor or business concerns or other conflicts because there's schools or other types of things there. It's in the floodplain. And then the other piece is, we're not just looking to stick people on a piece of land, right? So it really is, it's not only about finding the right location and then the physical structures for people to be sheltered in, but it's also about having some level of coordination, service coordination, security, services such as hand washing, shower, restrooms, as well as connection to social services in those sites. So I just want to, we oftentimes, the public is oftentimes asking, well, this is really easy, just move people from point A to point B. And if the challenge was really that simple, it wouldn't be that difficult. But we really do, it's very complex. And so I just want us to remember that as we're looking at solutions and trying to address these issues, it's oftentimes frustrating because I think folks that aren't involved in some of those details don't always understand the challenges that are involved in finding really suitable alternatives for folks. So I do just want to say as a summary that, my direction to staff of the last, several weeks on this issue has been, we're not sweeping people. That's not what we're doing. That's not what we're about. We're following both CDC and public health guidance, as well as, really trying to move folks into and that's, the county remains committed to investments in permanent supportive housing, and as Commissioner Trieger was indicating, working more upstream, both on downstream in terms of creating more housing options for people so that we can get people connected to housing or staying in it, and then upstream where we're working with things like tenant support and rapid resolution, where we're resolving challenges before people become unhoused. So that really is where we don't want to be spending, but these are the visible things we oftentimes hear about the public and the businesses from, because they see the impacts of these things. So you get emails about them, people testify at our board meetings, and they're understandably concerning. It's oftentimes those other things. We're going to do the groundbreaking for the Commons at MLK that Commissioner Bozovich talked about here, I think within the next week or so. We're doing tours with Homes for Good, so it's ready to open. So a lot of great stories around permanent supportive housing that are opening up. Those things oftentimes get lost in a lot of work that's happening sort of on the margins before people are falling into an unhoused situation. So a lot of work to continue there. The other thing I want to just pivot quickly to the MAT clinic. This is our medication assisted treatment facility, and we purchased and have renovated a building at 432 West 11th in Eugene. Phase 1 of this clinic was completed in late December, and the just bear with me here. Buprenorphine treatment program opened its doors to patients on January 11th. Phase 2 of the MAT clinic is the methadone treatment program, and that is on schedule for completion in mid-March. Pivot Architecture and Chambers Construction have been great partners with Lane County, both in the design and the construction of the program that will serve patients, staff, and community for many years to come. The construction change orders have been well within the established construction budget of $2.6 million so far, and we are on track to finish what I always want to see, on time and on budget, or ahead of schedule and under budget is ideal, but at least on time and on budget. The MAT clinic will operate under the terms of a good neighbor agreement developed cooperatively between Health and Human Services, the Jefferson Westside Neighborhood Association, and the Downtown Neighborhood Association. So I'm going to, in the coming weeks and months, because we have a number of these building capital projects where we've acquired buildings, renovating for various needs. You heard an update, actually the chair and vice chair heard an update on the parole and probation project at agenda setting this morning. We'll bring that update to the board as well. So at board meetings, my plan is over the coming weeks and months to provide updates on these various projects under county administrator announcements. So I appreciate your indulgence. I kind of took some time there. One last thing I want to do is I missed two appreciations when we talked about the FEMA work on the housing mission declaration that FEMA approved. Called out Alex Kyler. I also want to call out June Chadha from Senator Wyden's office and Jamie Doolin from the Mackenzie River Community Development Corporation. Those two individuals, along with Alex, really were our intergovernmental staff team that were coordinating between all these groups. And so I want to make sure that June and Jamie were called out as well. That's all I have, Chair, unless you have questions for me.
Does anyone have questions for Steve? I guess not. Commissioner business. Any commissioners with business? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go first. I'll break the ice. Just a couple of things really quickly. We each are liaisons or members of different committees and boards assigned in the last couple of weeks by the balance of the board. And then this last week, I've had several meetings. One that I will note in particular is that we had the meeting of the Performance Evaluation Committee last week. As we all know, we haven't had a performance evaluator for 2 years now. But that committee has continued to meet, continue to stay active, and is preparing an annual report at this point in time. We're preparing to fill one of the positions, and a second member resigned abruptly. That was Dennis Higmans, who had been in the past the chair, resigned abruptly. So we're now in the process of filling 2 positions. We have very qualified applicants who have applied to fill the position. The question, and for us to consider, and this is just mentioning it again, is that the future of the Office of the Performance Evaluator is in the hands of the board. It is one of our 3 employees. We've not had that employee position filled in quite some time. In the meantime, I personally we can all rest assured that performance evaluations continue through administration. We've had a number of performance evaluations and ongoing performance evaluations that allow us to identify areas to get better. These are internal evaluations typically done by a contractor, and they are called for and contracted by the administrator, or through the administrator, through Mr. Mokrahysky. And we've been successful in improving the operation of a number of different departments and areas of the county during that period of time. I was able to report that to the Performance Evaluation Committee. And while our last really functional evaluation came when Ms. Miller, Shannon Miller, was the evaluator, we had a number of evaluations. Rest assured that we're not out of the loop of evaluating on a continual basis. In fact, Chair Buck, you've been involved with both the, as the Chair Buck, see, I call you Chair Buck. You've been involved with both Holiday Farm and with COVID in your years as chair, and you know that evaluations continue on a regular basis. We're always finding ways to get better. And that is just kind of to ease our minds that we're not just resting, waiting for evaluations to happen. Mr. Mokrahysky, you don't need to talk about that, but we got a full report from Mr. Mokrahysky at the Performance Evaluation Committee meeting last week. So thank you. And once again, rest assured, you'll see a report upcoming from the committee.
Thank you, Vice Chair Farr. Commissioner Buck.
We have one item that I believe we need to reassign to the chair. So last year when COVID hit, as chair, we had weekly, bi-weekly meetings with the governor's office, and I was assigned to that role as chair. My name is still in that role, but I truly believe that that is something that our new chair should be involved in. And so just want to make sure that we have agreement amongst the board that those weekly calls, that we reassign that to our current chair so that we maintain continuity with the governor's office on those updates.
Thank you, Commissioner. I might add that we were literally told by the governor's office that that decision had to be made by this body. So I'm in complete support of it, and anyone may speak to it, or we can just get those head nods. Okay. I'm deciphering thumbs up and head nods. So unless someone yells out an objection, okay, very good. Thank you very much for bringing that up, Commissioner Buck. Are there any? Yes, Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. So I first just want to say I really appreciate the report on the MAT clinic from our county administrator. Our treatment courts need that capacity in our community. Quite often the folks that we're trying to do downward departures and get them away from the criminal justice system, that treatment is so critical as a piece of their overall reconstructing of their lives and keeping them out of prison or jail. I just want to say it's such a great thing that clinic's getting up and running. I really appreciate that. And then my other announcement, I'm just going to swing my camera around a little bit here. The snow is sticking now everywhere. And in the trees. Not a good thing.
We were wondering what you kept looking at, Commissioner.
It's been pretty amazing where we went from well above freezing before lunchtime to now snow sticking and all, and I'm starting to see the branches in the fir trees start to droop, which starts to make me nervous about electrical systems. I'm hoping maybe the temp comes back up a little bit. The kids around in the neighborhood are probably hating me, but.
Commissioner Trieger, now you see the wide range in commissioner topics at this point in the agenda. Yes, Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you. I'll just note when years and years ago, she's long gone now, but when my mother moved here from Philadelphia when she retired and people back east said, but doesn't it rain there a lot? And she would say, yes, but I don't have to shovel the rain. So I just wanted to circle back to Commissioner Farr's comments about the Performance Auditor Committee and if we're losing a member, and I remember Mr. Hidgmans, we served together on Budget Committee. So if we're losing some of that robustness of committee membership of people more familiar with the organization, and there's a way that I can be helpful and step in. I'm particularly thinking about, because we've had presentations last week and this week about some really significant new resources coming to us through COVID response and wildfire response in the form of, grants and other supports from FEMA and other federal programs, that it seems to me that's potentially only increasing the urgency with which we address having a performance auditor in place with those new programs and revenue streams coming on board. So we can chat more about that as follow up later, but just wanted to offer my availability to help with that.
Any other items? I will share then that one, just for our knowledge, the Climate Advisory Council has elected a very passionate and committed and articulate young woman, Haley K. Scott, as their chair, and they have elected Amanda Astor as their. Did you hear that, Commissioner Bozievich? Amanda Astor is their vice chair. So that occurred, and we'll be hearing from that body soon. I also wanted to share, this is just share that prior to the state chamber's suit, as it relates to reopening businesses, I was involved in discussions and expect to get re-engaged once that settles itself out. With several business leaders who wanted, instead of just criticizing, to actually propose ways in which selected businesses, staging them in certain ways consistent with state protocols, might start looking at reopening. But those discussions will be suspended until we see what the disposition of this suit is. But it was very disappointing because those discussions were just, they served to bring people together that previously hadn't been. And I always look forward to doing that when the opportunity exists. But those are my only two announcements. Steve, do you have any further announcements? No?
Nope, I have nothing.
Well, in that case, we can adjourn without objection our meeting, or recess it, excuse me, and pick it up again tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
Oh, we actually, Chair, we have
more. I'm looking at my agenda in front of the screen.
We have the Board of Health.
I'm sorry, future board assignment request.
Actually, what we're gonna do, you can do future board assignments, and then you're gonna recess the meeting of the Board of Commissioners.
Oh, my goodness.
And then you're gonna have a joint meeting of the Board of Health and the Board of Commissioners, and we have Karen Gaffney, Dr. Maxwell, and Jennifer Webster here to talk about our community health improvement plan.
Oh, forget about the doctors. It's snowing.
In that meeting, we each got 2 votes, by the way.
I am so sorry. I apologize. Thank you. Thank you for catching that one, Mr. Mokrahajski. So let's do future board assignment requests, and then we'll move on. Commissioner Farr.
Really not a future assignment request, but just kind of rekindling of what is an ongoing request, and that is the inventory of public land. And I'll be sending out a notes that I have on that, on the work that's been done already, and what we have in place. But it needs to be fine-tuned, honed, and put into a position where we can make decisions as to whether or not or how we can use it.
Thank you for not letting go of that, Commissioner. I'm sorry. Yes, Commissioner Trieger.
Just to follow up, thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Farr, I'm hoping what would be helpful to me generally, but also in responding to constituents, is that list includes things that have been considered and taken off the table with a list of with why, to help continue the conversation in community about what goes into the decision-making process and what the many factors are, as Mr. Mokrahajski was mentioning. Because it's seemingly easy on the surface. You have a space, why not just move people there? To be able to share back with community what the criteria and the considerations were to taking a site off the table, or what made a site workable that is now being used. So I think that would be helpful, not just from this moment forward, what are the possible sites we haven't looked into yet, if that makes sense as a request for how we structure that list. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? We are now recessing the Board of Commissioners meeting, and we are opening up a joint meeting with the Board of Health and Board of Commissioners. Item number 1, now I'm looking at the right agenda. Are there any adjustments to this agenda?
No.
No, no one else is. Is there any emergency business before we get on to the subject at hand?
No.
Thank you. I'm switching between my screen and Diana's screen, so excuse me. Okay, forgive me. I'm sorry it took so long, but we'll get there. We have item 3 now, Health and Human Services, Order 21-01-26-07, in the matter of adopting the Community Health Improvement Plan for 2021 through 2025. There are several important people with us, led by Karen Gaffney. Karen, if you would introduce the group and start the discussion.
Good afternoon, Chair Burney, Commissioners. It is truly a pleasure to be back with you. I know all of you are familiar with our Community Health Improvement Plan and your role as the Board of Health in doing a final review and approval of that. I am going to keep my remarks very short here in the beginning, but I do want to make sure I introduce 2 of our key staff out of our prevention section. I think both of them are familiar to all of you. We have Dr. Elizabeth Maxwell, who is the supervisor now of our prevention team. That might be a new role for her since she was last here in front of you. And then Jennifer Webster, who's the epidemiologist in public health, who is assigned to our community health improvement work. So I'm actually going to toss it over to Elizabeth to introduce the item, and then I'm here to help answer questions if those come up as well. Elizabeth?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, always a good sign. So good afternoon. We're here today to present the 2021 through 25 Community Health Improvement Plan, also known as the CHIP, for consideration, discussion, review, and approval. This is the third CHIP for Lane County. Previously, we've made plans for 3-year periods, but today's CHIP is for a 5-year period. This is the second CHIP being done as Live Healthy Lane. As most of you know, the CHIP is a community-wide strategic plan for improving our community's health and well-being. All of our other partners have approved this current iteration, and now we're bringing it before the Board of Health before it goes to the Live Healthy Lane Executive Committee. I'd like to introduce Jennifer Webster, the CCO epidemiologist and the lead staff from Public Health Prevention. She's here today to present the CHIP plan and answer any questions. Jennifer.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
And is my screen showing? Because I don't see it. Okay, great. So as Elizabeth said, I'm Jennifer Webster. I am an epidemiologist in the prevention section, and I am very excited to be here today to present the 2021-2025 Community Health Improvement Plan. This CHIP represents more than 2 years of work gathering data, engaging the community, and compiling and analyzing all this information to craft a plan for improving the health of the people in Lane County. Today's presentation is part of the process of gaining approval from all of the governing bodies of all Live Healthy Lane partners so that we can use this plan to create the optimal conditions for health in Lane County over the next 5 years. And as you know, Live Healthy Lane brings together Lane County, Peace Health Oregon Network, Trillium Community Health Plan, United Way of Lane County, Lane Community Health Council, and local organizations and other community members to develop a community health assessment and community health improvement plan, or the CHA and the CHIP, and to contribute to improving the lives of everyone in Lane County. This CHA is the assessment that identifies the key priorities that need to be addressed in order to improve the community's health. And I shared the major findings with you all in November during Public Health semi-annual report, so I'll just briefly be recapping those today. And then the CHIP is the strategic plan or the roadmap that outlines the collective actions to address those priorities. And that's what I'm mostly going to focus on today. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about our process. Live Healthy Lane uses MAP, or Mobilizing for Action Through Planning and Partnership, a framework for conducting our assessment and developing the plan. MAP is a nationally recognized framework that, in addition to having a strong focus on community engagement, meets accreditation standards for public health. MAP outlines 4 major assessments for understanding the health of the community: the community themes and strengths assessment, the local public health system assessment, the forces of change assessment, the community health status assessment, and then Live Healthy Lane also conducted an additional 2 assessments as part of this CHA. The Care Integration Assessment, which was a pilot exploring Lane County's integration of physical, behavioral, and oral health as required by Oregon House Bill 2675. And because of findings of significant disparities, we included an update to Lane County Public Health 2017 Health Equity Report. So the CHA uses data and an extensive community engagement process to identify key factors that influence health in Lane County. And most of those factors are complex and cannot be effectively addressed by a single agency or organization. So by using a collective impact model, the CHIP provides a focus for the efforts of many stakeholders across multiple sectors, which can boost the impact of those efforts. At its most basic, collective impact includes 5 key elements: a common agenda, a shared measurement system, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and a backbone agency. And so the Lane County CHIP is our common agenda. It outlines a shared measurement system, and it describes a set of mutually reinforcing activities. The CHIP is not meant to be a work plan or to define new actions or programs. Rather, it is a roadmap to help focus and coordinate efforts so that everyone in the community can contribute to creating the conditions that support health. So I'm just going to briefly go through the 4 assessments. So the Community Themes and Strengths Assessment answers the question of what is important to the quality of life and good health in our community. What assets do we have as a community to support good health? The assessment we conducted confirmed that the same issues that were identified as part of our 2016-2019 CHIP, housing, living wage jobs, access to healthy food, affordable childcare, and healthcare, all continue to be issues for health for many people in Lane County. And in addition, promoting healthy behaviors, ending racism and discrimination, and an increased emphasis on improving mental health were priorities that were identified in our current assessment. And then the strengths and assets of Lane County as a community were identified as collaboration, policy work, and a general understanding of the social determinants of health. The local public health system assessment answers the question, what are the competencies and capacities of our local health system? And note this is an assessment of the multiple systems providing the 10 essential public health services, not just the county health department. This assessment revealed improvement since 2015 in the 4 areas that were identified as most needed, and also identified continued improvement in data sharing, communications, engaging community partners, and a continued focus on health promotion and health education were additional highlights. And as many of you know, these are also things that we have highlighted as needs in our response to COVID. Forces of change answers the question, what is occurring or what might occur that impacts health or the public health system? What specific threats or opportunities might be generated by these occurrences? So the forces of change is primarily interested in things that are outside the control of the public health system and have multi-sector implications. And while a global pandemic was not part of the discussion back in 2018, it is clear that the threats and opportunities that were identified as part of that discussion are the same ones that have arisen as we have responded to a global pandemic. And they include things like racism, homelessness, social isolation, immigration policies, and some of the opportunities that were identified were engaging with community-based organizations, supportive housing, more innovations in funding, telemedicine, and strengthening cultural competence. The Community Health Status Assessment answers the question, how healthy is our community? This assessment uses secondary data from multiple sources to paint a picture of the community's overall health and the social conditions that drive health. Overall, Lane County remains a moderately healthy community with well-educated and active residents. However, there are several health conditions and social determinants of health that vary dramatically based on race and ethnicity and by geography, creating significant inequities in health and in the conditions necessary to create health. Some of the other key findings from this assessment were that rates of chronic disease have remained stable over the last few years, but rates of sexually transmitted infections continue to increase. Lane County continues to struggle with economic recovery from the 2008 recession, with 20% of the population living in poverty and 40% experiencing a housing cost burden. Lane County uses tobacco, alcohol, and cannabis at higher rates than the rest of the state. High school graduation rates are lower in Lane County compared to the rest of the state. And there is a troubling trend of decreasing mental health, particularly among youth in Lane County and in Oregon. And then, as I said, because of the findings of disparities in outcomes and in the social determinants of health, we also updated Lane County's Health Equity Report to help better demonstrate how a history of policies and practices that intentionally left some people behind have culminated to create the inequities we see today. So the key findings from that report are that the inequities we found are not surprising, given the history of racism and racist policies, that all racial and ethnic groups experience inequities, but they do not experience the same inequities, and that we need better local data to understand the inequities that exist in Lane County. So the data from these assessments was compiled and analyzed to provide us with these 4 themes, which are found in the executive summary of the community health assessment. A significant proportion of people in Lane County struggle to meet their basic living costs. There are significant disparities based on race and geography in Lane County. There is a troubling trend of worsening mental health in Lane County, particularly among youth. And there are multiple social and environmental conditions in Lane County that contribute to unhealthy behaviors and poor health outcomes. So these 4 themes went through an extensive root cause analysis and community engagement process to identify 3 strategic issues, the 3 boxes in blue at the top of your screen. How do we ensure incomes are sufficient to meet basic living costs? How do we create community conditions that support behavioral health and physical well-being? And how do we address current and historical injustices that produce disparities? Additional conversations with more than 21 community partners, community coalitions, and community advisory groups helped to inform one overarching goal in recognition that the strategic issues were linked. And our goal is to create community conditions necessary to promote behavioral health and physical wellness across the lifespan for all people in Lane County. And then those conversations also help generate the 4 areas of strategic focus that you see in the orange boxes. Supporting economic development that ensures sufficient income and affordability, transforming institutions, policies, and resource allocations to ensure equity in the future, ensure systems of care address the needs of the whole person and are accessible across the lifespan, and implement community and organizational policies that support healthy choices and mental well-being. And so this is the foundation of the Community Health Improvement Plan. And you can also find a complete list of the stakeholders engaged in this process in the appendix to the CHIP. So now we're going to walk through each of the strategic areas of focus and discuss some of the actions that were developed through yet another process of engaging key stakeholders, mostly through key informant interviews, a few focus groups, and a brief survey. So to improve health outcomes by addressing key economic determinants of health, the focus needs to be both on increasing income as well as making sure the cost of basic needs are within reach for all people in Lane County. Ensuring economic self-sufficiency for everyone in Lane County, including improved access to living wage jobs, as well as increasing the affordability of basic needs like housing, food, childcare, and healthcare, is the purpose of this strategy. And I just wanted to also highlight that while housing continues to top the priority list for improving health, when we asked the community about strategies to improve access to housing, the overwhelming response from the community was that incomes in Lane County are insufficient to cover basic costs of living. And so that is a big contributor to why housing is a problem. This is why the strategy focuses on investing in infrastructure, including housing policy, transportation access, local economic development, and ensuring that our most vulnerable populations have access to shelter, food, childcare, and healthcare. Okay. So integration and collaboration among care providers emerged as a key to ensuring that systems of care are adequate to address the health needs of all people in Lane County. While access to behavioral health services remains a priority, as one community member pointed out, access is a low bar. Providing services where people are, offering support from community health workers, traditional healthcare workers, peer support navigators, and improving cultural and linguistic competency across the system are also very important to ensuring that the care provided can meet the needs of the whole person. And then our next strategy area is about implementing policies, and there are many evidence-based policies that can be implemented in multiple sectors that address some of the most pressing health concerns in Lane County. And these are all policies that strive to create an environment that values and encourages healthy behaviors. So the CHIP includes a menu of policies that organizations and the community could put into place that have been demonstrated to support healthy choices and mental well-being. Because there's a lot of policies out there, we narrowed the field by focusing mostly on policies with demonstrated effectiveness in addressing social isolation, substance use, adverse childhood experiences, healthy eating, and active living, and across multiple sectors. So on page 11 of the CHIP, there's a matrix of evidence-based policies that helps to illustrate the myriad of ways that schools, work sites, healthcare providers, and others can contribute to creating community conditions to support health. And then there are also evidence-based policies included for each of the other strategies. And then finally, we know that inequity harms all of us and contributes to conditions that are barriers to health for everyone. And so to effectively address the inequities that exist in Lane County, our organizations and agencies need to improve their cultural humility, authentically engage the communities that experience inequities, and share decision-making power with those communities. The organizations and agencies serving our community need to work together to change the conditions that have created these inequities by enacting policies and resource allocations that place achieving equity at their center. And some of the examples of work that we highlighted that could be done are providing trainings and setting minimum standards of cultural competence for our organizations, use of an equity lens in all decision-making, and building trust and sharing power with historically oppressed communities. And then, because I'm a data nerd, my favorite part is how will we know we were making things better? So Live Healthy Lane has convened an evaluation, development, and tracking team, which is known as EDIT, which is comprised of analysts from all of the partner organizations and some community stakeholders to develop population outcome measures that can be tracked over time. So the CHIP outlines measures for overall success, such as poverty rates and chronic disease rates, as well as measures for each of the strategies areas. And some of these measures are readily available, and we have baseline data in the community health assessment, and others we'll need to further refine or we'll need to identify data for. And this will be the ongoing work of that team. And you can see on page 13, the CHIP includes a more detailed descriptions of the measures currently identified. And then our next steps, finally, once the plan is approved and adopted by all of the Live Healthy Lane partners, we will begin planning the action phase or the implementation phase. And once again, this will involve engaging the community and key stakeholders, as we develop objectives, work plans, performance measures, and timelines. And then taking action, collecting data, and monitoring progress between now and 2025 will be the work of implementing the CHIP. And that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
This is my moment to ask if there are any questions, comments, discussion. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Thank you so much, Ms. Webster, for that presentation. I just want to offer in 2009, the legislature passed House Bill 2009, which created the Oregon Health Authority as separate from the Oregon Department of Human Services. And I had the great honor at that time, as I was running a public health nonprofit, to sit on the first statewide health improvement plan committee. So I know how much work goes into a process like creating a health improvement plan for a community. And as I was looking at your presentation, I was thinking back to 10 years ago, almost 11 now, when that group convened. And I was feeling both really positive and also really dismayed because so many of the same issues were showing up then as they're showing up now. So sort of a good news, bad news, right? That we know what the problems are. We know what the cause of many of them are. We know what some of the solutions are. And what stood out as most different to me is, one, we knew 10 and 11 years ago that the deep history of this country and its racist roots are contributing to poor health outcomes because they are what shape policies and systems that people operate in. And what's different now, 10 years later, is we're much more explicit in our shared understanding of that and ready and willing to talk about it and address it and name it. We can't fix a problem if we don't have the language to talk about it. So I love that cultural humility phrase. Am I getting that right? That's a new phrase. So I think that is really important to point out as a difference 10 years on and from what I see. And the other that's really interesting to me is that the tech technology side of things is the most objectively new bucket of work and impact than from the last time I was involved in a process like this 10 years ago, because of the advances in technology, for better or worse. In some ways, it keeps us more connected. Telemedicine makes services more accessible, but I think it also contributes to isolation and disconnection in a funny, seemingly paradoxical way. So that's really interesting to me, to see technology's impact on health and health outcomes folded into a plan. But I think ultimately, and you named it, Ms. Webster, is that gulf between income, wages, and housing is far too wide, and so many people are falling into that chasm, and that's really creating so many of the poor health outcomes and tragedies and crises that we're seeing in our communities. So yay for progress, and too bad we're not further along, I guess is my comment. And thanks again for all the hard work that went into this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie, and thank you, Ms. Webster. And Karen, thank you for assembling this presentation for us. It's a great presentation. You know, this is the third chip that we've looked at, and really the refining in the chip seems to be getting more and more to the point each time. I'm looking at page 13 of the chip, which is called Tracking the Chip's Success. And like you, Ms. Webster, I'm a bit of a data nerd myself. That is to say, I like to see how things are progressing and assign numerical, if possible, values to the progress. It's not always possible to do that, but what we're looking at on page 13 is what seems like the start of a living document with a list of goals, strategies, and the second column is areas to build work plans. For instance, strategy 1 is support economic development, etc. And under the second column, it says 1, employment, A, unemployment rate, B, available jobs by zip code. That seems to me relatively easy to just plug numbers into and put it on a timeline to see how the improvement occurs based upon those criteria that are listed there, and that the work plans would be tagged to the particular lines on the what you're showing on page 13. Once again, to me, it looks like a strategic planning living document that really helps everybody to be pulling on the same page. I really appreciate the way this one is laid out. I think that once again, we've refined the chip more and more. And Commissioner Trigger, yes, many of the same issues are on here. And many of the same issues we've got to acknowledge will always be on here, no matter what we do, because we will never have adequate housing. And you and I work for Food for Lane County, and our goal was to that nobody in Lane County will be hungry, knowing that that's a really impossible goal to achieve. But moving in that direction, it will always be on the work plan, always be at the front of our minds. So, you know, making certain that we're able to track the progress, making certain that when we report the work of the chip, we're able to demonstrate to people numerically, if possible, certainly by examples of how we have made progress. Housing will always be a big issue, and identifying the things that can move the needle the fastest will certainly be the way that we can to improve the numbers as we move throughout the work plan of this chip. Then one thing that I wrote down, Ms. Webster, and I'm going to ask you to say it again. You said the chip is not intended to be a work plan, and I didn't quite get the rest of that.
I'm going to go back to my notes to make sure I get that right. But basically, it's not meant to be prescriptive in what we as the county or any other organization that signs on to the chip is told to do, but rather to really just lay out, these are the areas of work that we need to do collectively together and really kind of focus all our energy in a similar way in order to make progress. And just find my sense.
That is wonderfully said, because each of our organizations that are partners in the CHIP have our own strategic plans, and really keying the elements of our strategic plan to the outline of the CHIP is important to make certain that we're all pulling in the same direction. The CHIP isn't our strategic plan. It's not our work plan, but it informs our work plan. It informs our strategic plan. And if we can all get that same level of information, then the chances of us making significant progress, Commissioner Krieger, on things that have always been on the list, that we will always see on the list, but that we will continue to chip at. I'm really excited, Ms. Gaffney. I'm going to say that this is the best one I've seen so far. The team seems to be getting the art down to a wonderful, wonderful science, so to speak. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Berney and Vice Chair Farr. I appreciate your acknowledgement that we continue to improve in our planning process. And I think part of that is our county team effort. Part of it is our community too, that we have really deepened our understanding of a community about what it's going to take to achieve better health. And that it's not going to be in that clinical arena. Although, of course, clinicians are important, but it really is this deeper and kind of harder work, quite frankly, to do to change those underlying conditions. And this last discussion on strategic plans versus the CHIP, I think, is an important one, too. As I was listening to Ms. Webster's presentation, I was reflecting on how the county's updated strategic plan that includes 3 specific lenses around collective impact, around equity, and around financial stewardship are absolutely reflected in our community CHIP as well. And so the more we do this collectively and have those connections interwoven, the more excited I am about the deep change and overall improvement we're going to see.
It feels more like a fabric than ever before. Mm-hmm.
Is there a commissioner that would like to speak after Commissioner Farr talked about chipping away at the CHIP? Commissioner Buck.
I have a question on this. You had mentioned the initial work started before there was a global pandemic. And so I'm curious what you, if you, or what you had to adjust for in this version for that kind of a scenario.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we had a lot of discussion early in 2020 after things kind of shut down and it became clear that the pandemic was going to control our lives about how and if we should incorporate response to COVID into the CHIP. And what we realized in looking at the assessment results is that the same issues that were making COVID difficult for our community are the issues that make health difficult for our community all the time. So really all we did was change how we engage the community. So we did a lot more virtual engagement than we would have. In some ways, I feel like we got a lot more engagement by doing that because we didn't have to travel all over the county to go to different meetings to talk to people and hold those focus groups. We could just get on people's agendas and have those conversations. And so in some ways, I feel like the community engagement process is even more robust because we were confined to this virtual environment.
Are there any other comments, Commissioner Bozovich?
I just have a couple quick questions because I'm a little bit concerned that there's somewhat of a disconnect between the survey of over 500 community members and where we ended up with strategies. So I wanted to ask a question. In that survey that was referred to in the assessment, there was a ranking of various issues, and of course, affordable housing was #1 by a good ways. And I was kind of wondering, were they offered those 7 particular items, or was it more free form? How was that survey done? Because where people gave them a ranking between 1 and 7, were they just ranking 7 items?
Yeah. So the way that the survey was structured to follow up on the priorities that were identified in 2016 for the 2016 to 2019 CHIP. And so those were the 7 priorities that were listed in the prior CHIP. And then so the way the survey was constructed is that it was a question about has housing improved, gotten worse, stayed the same since 2015? And then there was an open-ended question to say, what could we do to address this issue better? And then at the very end, there was an open-ended question that asked, what have we missed? What is not included in our list of priorities from our prior CHIP that we should be considering moving forward? And so again, what we heard overwhelmingly, and we did a qualitative analysis of over 400 free-form responses for each of those areas. And for housing, what we heard overwhelmingly was that it's really that gap between incomes and cost of living that is creating the housing issue from the community's perspective. And so that's kind of how we acknowledge that housing is still a very big priority and very needed, and a lot of work still needs to be done, but that the emphasis really needs to be on both sides of the equation. It's not just that we need more housing, but we need people to have sufficient income to afford housing as well.
I would agree with that assessment. It just seemed that like the affordable housing side got left out in the strategies, even though it was identified as the number one concern by a long shot and above access to living wage jobs. I hope that the board, as we move forward outside of the CHIP in our other policies, will consistently ask ourselves, will this lead to more and higher paying jobs, and will this lead to more and lower cost housing? As you know, the combination of those two things is what's going to make housing affordable. Because it's not just about trying to get more jobs, because if we're doing that through some kind of mandated minimum wage increases, that increases the cost of housing too, because that minimum wage is built into housing costs. So that doesn't do it. So we have to work on both ends of the spectrum. We got to work on increasing housing inventory and lowering the cost, removing barriers there, as well as increasing economic opportunity and providing more space for folks to have the ability to get higher wage jobs. Yeah, I look forward to where we don't even talk about minimum wage, because no one would even think about paying minimum wage, because they wouldn't be able to hire employees, because our economy was hot enough that you have to compete for employees, which generally has been the case for quite a long time until recently. So just want to make sure that we hadn't lost that focus on housing somewhere in this, because it did seem to be the largest concern from our community members.
I was going to make a statement, but that's okay. Please, anyone, Commissioner Farr and any other commissioners that want to continue a second round without your chair.
And Chair, I'm looking forward to your statement and your wrap. I just one little tiny point I wanted to make, and that is a certain amount of dichotomy sometimes when we talk about the things that we want to do and the things that in practice we actually do. And Commissioner Bozich touched on housing, that we want to make housing more affordable while we do things to make housing more expensive by policies that we establish. How do we balance that? Another one that I'd like to point out is under strategy 3 is implementing community and organizational policies that support healthy choices. And under item 4, we talk about rates of alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis use. So we are identifying the use of cannabis as an unhealthy choice, yet there seems to be a bit of a rush in our community to speak out about cannabis being a healthy choice in some cases. So how do we balance that, and how do we make certain that there aren't mixed messages being sent? But Chair Bernie, I'm really highly anticipatory of your.
Oh, no. Ms. Webster, do you have an answer to Commissioner Farr's question?
Okay.
Unless Jennifer can go if she wants.
No, take it away. I'm not a cannabis expert.
Well, I'm not either, but I would just. The alcohol and drug team from prevention has been in front of the commissioners a couple of times to talk about some of these issues. I think that's partially maybe what Commissioner Farr is referring to, is that it's been a long time ago now, but we did bring before you some issues with advertising and density and some other issues, that we were kind of we were monitoring and a little bit concerned about. And then I think both times that we presented to you all were also a little bit concerned. And so I just want you to know that we are continuing to do that work the best we can under hard conditions. You know, it's a pandemic. And so as you might imagine, the community is not in a really ready place to talk about cannabis, but we have staff people who are devoted to that. We are monitoring it, and we definitely have it on our back burner to come in front of you again at a later date when things have calmed down a little bit and talk about some of those issues. So it is being worked on. I just want to reassure you of that. And Karen might want to add more to that. I don't know. Maybe that's sufficient.
Well, I think, thanks, Elizabeth. The only thing I would add is, Commissioner Farr, you're absolutely right. There is oftentimes a tension in many of these issues, and I think it is our obligation, not only as the health department, but also as the Board of Health, to have really clear messaging for the community about what we mean by health, what our recommendations are, and Elizabeth actually mentioned the things I was thinking about in terms of the work that has been suspended during the pandemic, but needs to come back to you specifically around the issue of cannabis. It is, it's a challenge. We get revenue from taxing from that, and it has very definite negative impacts on health in the community. So we will definitely come back and spend more time with you talking about that issue.
Thank you, Karen, Dr. Maxwell, and thank you, Chair.
Oh, Vice Chair, please. I want to open it up because we could begin another round of questions. We do have a motion that we're going to have to vote on eventually, but is there any other commissioner that wants to make any other points at this time or ask any other questions? This is difficult for me, this one. Let me explain that I couldn't personally appreciate and resonate with the intent behind this. And yet, many of the problems you're discussing didn't just occur 10 years ago, they occurred 40 years ago and 50 years ago. And I'm not convinced that things have gotten better as it relates to a lot of these areas. So if I may, just a couple of questions. One, how many FTE are attached to the CHIP process per se?
I'm looking at Elizabeth and Jennifer. Do you mean on county staff? Because it really is a community collaborative process that forms the CHIP.
The things that we have authority over.
Two.
Two?
Myself and Leah, yeah.
Thanks,
and I guess I would just clarify, the creation of the CHIP is not the full-time work for either of those people, but we have two staff who are assigned this as part of their work.
Thank you for the clarification, because 2 FTE for me would be different than part of 2 different. 45 years ago, I was told that the world was changing and people's pay was going to relate more to how influential they could be with people that worked for other agencies and institutions, as opposed to just how many people worked for them. So my next question is, what kind of influence, either direct or indirect, with what specific groups does this planning process actually have?
So the Live Healthy Lane partnership includes both the CCOs for Lane County, United Way of Lane County, and Peace Health Oregon Network as our nonprofit hospital system. And so this CHIP becomes their CHIP. So they are also, once their governing bodies approve it, it becomes their CHIP as well.
Okay, thanks.
Does that answer your question?
Chairman, can I add just a little bit more to Jennifer's answer too? Because I think it's a really important question. In my mind, that's we pass a CHIP and so what? And to me, it's important that both the board and the community understand that when Jennifer says this is Peace Health's CHIP, for instance, or Trillium's CHIP, or the Pacific Source CCO, that means that they use it strategically to drive investments, both community benefit investments in the community, as well as prioritizing staff resources. Similar to how the county, when you've crafted your strategic plan under our goal of health and safety, you've really looked at what's in the CHIP to help drive those investments. And we've said, for instance, the investments we've made around permanent supportive housing and expanding community health centers, all of that has been connected to the prior CHIP that we're just sunsetting. So I think that's, in terms of influence, that's how we see this this plan having an impact.
Oh, and I'm supportive, but I'm just going to keep going a little more granularly here. So if that's the case, do we have data? Because you've all talked about, that measuring. Do we have data on specifically dollars, how that's impacted and redirected dollars with those organizations that you've just mentioned?
I'm looking at Jennifer. I don't know if that has been collected, but I think that we could at least, probably not to a granular level, but for instance, I could go through the last few years and look at the decisions that have been made by the Board of Commissioners and the Board of Health in terms of allocating resources in our organization and identify a number of places where those investments are specifically tied to priorities in the CHIP, and then some things where we can't quantify, like your policy choices that have been made specifically guided by the CHIP. So I think we could do that. I don't know, Jennifer, if the group already has or not.
Not to my knowledge. This is the first CHIP that I've actually been involved in this to this extent, but it's definitely a question that we could take to the partner organizations and as part of our evaluation of the last CHIP to see if other organizations would be willing to share that information.
And I'm sorry, board, bear with me just. And is there any connection between wanting to truly improve systems and then looking at new careers models where some groups have literally hired community health workers from and underemployed people in communities that don't have access to resources, trained those people that are already, they know who their neighbors are, on what resources exist in the county or the community, empower them with cards and exponentially increase, give them money, pay them money, and increase the amount of community health workers that are measuring data and providing you with information as it relates to the actual on the ground impacts of the CHIP?
I'm looking at Elizabeth and Jennifer, so I don't have the specifics. What I can tell you is there's been a huge focus statewide and in Lane County as well to increase community health worker, traditional health worker, peer support worker influence on the ground. I don't know that the focus has been in order to collect data about the CHIP in particular. It's been much more a focus on how do we bring people with lived experience into the workforce to deliver those services in a way that will be much more impactful and effective. For instance, here in the county, we employ community health workers and peer support specialists with lived experience from community for exactly those reasons that you're talking about.
Thank you very much. And there's a great model called New Careers for the Poor that now deceased Dr. Art Pearl preached at the University of Oregon in the 60s. And it's a wonderful model. Anyway, I'm taking too much time. Are there other questions before we move to a motion? Because I know that's what staff requires at this time to move forward. The chair is ready to entertain a motion. Commissioner Farr, Vice Chair Farr.
Chair Burney, I move passage of Order 21-01-26-07 in the matter of adopting the Community Health Improvement Plan for 2021 through 2025.
I'll second.
It's because of my ears. Who was that seconded by? I'm sorry. Commissioner Krieger, thank you. Chair, the motion to approve Order 21-06-26-07 was made by Vice Chair Farr and seconded by Commissioner Trieger. Is there discussion to the motion? Hearing none, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It has been unanimously, with a vote of 5-0, approved to move forward with the adoption of Order 2101-2607. Thank you all for taking all of our questions, our concerns, and moving forward with this important endeavor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, unless someone corrects me, which has only occurred several times this board meeting, we are adjourning the joint meeting of the Board of Health and Board of Commissioners, and we are re-entering the meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners, and we are on item number 16, review of assignments.
Thank you, Chair. And the one item I had, but I want to make sure there are head nods for. I saw two commissioners interested in this one, but I just want to make sure there are head nods. But I heard both Commissioner Farr and Commissioner Trieger ask for a list of properties that are available, not available, kind of the decision process for or constraints or reasons why they may be options or not options. I want to clarify, this would be for use, I think, for emergency shelter purposes. I want to clarify if this is just county-owned properties or if it's all, you know, city-owned properties within the county, private-owned properties. So I want to clarify that and then just make sure there are 3 head nods for that assignment.
From my point of view, Chair, and that is that it wasn't really a new assignment. We have already compiled the inventory. It just needs to be refined into a list of some kind so we can make decisions regarding how to use the properties. And it was not just county property. The list that we have compiled already is EWEB, school districts, cities, etc. Pretty general list, pretty broad list, and many of the properties have been ruled out as was mentioned earlier. And I don't foresee it being a huge assignment, Mr. Mokrahayski. I can kind of give you a little bit of a matrix or chart that I just drew up in about 90 seconds to show kind of what I had in mind on that. And I don't think you need to, for me, you don't need to put it on an assignment list. It's just something that needs to be refined. It can be done more or less informally.
Commissioner Trieger?
Commissioner Farr, for clarification, however, I was also asking that, as Mr. Mokrahayski mentioned, that it include a bit of like what are the criteria and why some we're moving forward with, some we've taken off the table, some we've yet to evaluate. So that does seem to me like a bit more work than sort of a list. And I do think specifically calling out the properties that are county owned because there are going to be fewer barriers for us moving forward once we work through the criteria. If we were to use one of those properties than if we have to work with another jurisdiction or a private property owner. And the other thing is, I would just mention, I had asked if it's possible to get some kind of accounting or sense of the expenses in emergency response to unhoused, to addressing camp clearance, to providing minimal sanitation support to camps and so on, to get a sense of what our investment has been this past year.
So on the first one, the regarding properties, maybe the best thing for us to do would be to bring forward to the board a brief discussion about this and share what we have. And then if you'd like some additional refinement, then we can do that. Because I'm not exactly, I know there have been different iterations and we've compiled lists and had maps, but I'm not aware of a specific list of, we may have that. So I guess if that sounds all right, we could bring for discussion at a future board meeting an overview of existing property evaluation that we've done for county-owned properties. I just want to, we have 3 head nods for that? Okay.
Commissioner Bozovich wants to say something.
Yeah, just want to step in here and say I am far more interested in seeing an inventory of properties for permanent facilities than I am for temporary. You know, we had to give up a piece of our fairgrounds because we didn't have a good inventory of lands available for permanent facilities when we had an opportunity for a grant from the state, which I still think was not a smart thing to do. But we don't have any properties identified from the city of Eugene as surplus properties available for permanent supportive housing or possible permanent shelter. I want to see that list. You know, that's the list I think we're missing right now, is where are opportunities for permanent supported housing and permanent shelter space. That's more interesting to me than where can we throw a bunch of tents temporarily, because that's the long-term solution. And it's a place where we're missing, and we've missed, you know, we've taken action here as a board because we didn't have a good list from our partners who've been dragging their feet about this issue. So that's what I'm much more interested in that than the temporary side.
So just to get some focus here. So Steve, you were asking for one, if 3 head nods occurred, which I think has occurred. And now it sounds like you're asking for clarification on specifically what the request was. Is that correct?
Well, I think what I'm suggesting is, and you know, to Commissioner Bozovich's point, I don't, frankly, when we do these evaluations, we do them in the context of looking at property that we own, that is vacant or available and not, you know, for another use, and it would be suitable for some type of habitation, whether it's emergency or permanent use. So the decision then about, there are multiple factors that go into ultimately the decision about, for example, the fairgrounds property, and that's going to be a board decision. So my suggestion is, at least as a starting point, and what I find oftentimes with our assignments is sometimes if we get too granular in the initial request, it can be very cumbersome to sort of, and staff end up having to play sort of a little bit of a guessing game about exactly what you want. In this case, since we've done some of the work, I think it may be most effective and efficient if we bring you the information we have, and then you can ask to further refine that or for additional information. So that's my suggestion. And then again, you know, it's really at the end of the day up to the board to ask the questions about, okay, what's the zoning look like? Is this suitable for emergency or for permanent housing? And then ultimately, what you want to use it for is up to you.
May I add one thing here? I'm sorry, Steve, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's it. I just wanted to close that one. If there's, I want to make sure we have kind of like, I think I see 3 head nods, but I want to make sure about that.
I would, before we reconfirm the head nods, I'm going to ask, one, they be hands raised, not heads nodded, so we really know. And then 2, Commissioner Bozovich, I think when Mr. Mokrahysky brings that back, there's the opportunity to say, let's inlay it with certain criteria that we can get at what you're discussing, because all of this will be useful information, because we need some baseline to move forward and expand from. So with that, could head nods be hand raises? How many people agree with that request? Okay.
Okay,
there
great.
we go.
Then the other one Commissioner Trigger asked for was an accounting of the cost. And I think, you know, we can pull together the information that we have available around that. I guess the question I would have is, how far back do you want to go? Because an example is, you know, the butterfly lot. We had 100 people camping at the butterfly lot. We relocated to their property. We called it Camp 99 on Highway 99. A lot of cost involved in that. So every year there's frankly unbudgeted costs that we didn't expect we were going to have Camp 99. We didn't expect we were going to have West 11th. These are sort of emergency response kind of thing. We do winter strategies, which we expect we're going to have these organized, planful investments we make in dealing, and then we have these emergencies that pop up that we have to respond to. So if the request is sort of isolated to unbudgeted, sort of unanticipated emergency response outside of winter strategies and all the other things, if that's a thumbs up, then then I just want to know, is it just for last fiscal year, last two, last three? What does that look like?
If I may, Chair Bernie, to respond, I think for me, I mean, the more I think about it, I could see utility in different timelines of looking at. I'm guessing that this most recent, mostly calendar year, that COVID presented certain challenges in that we reduced our number of shelter beds and congregate sites, which probably increased the number of people on the street, which created more need for emergency response and just hand washing stations and all that sort of thing. So for me, I think going back 2 years to get a little bit of a compare and contrast, and also to start seeing if there are particular trends and what are the areas in which we're spending the money in camp relocation and supports for existing camps. I just don't even have a sense of what those line items are. I just know I'm hearing we're spending a lot of money and we're spending staff time going around relocating camps and wondering what our investment in that emergency response. And you say each year there's unanticipated or emergency costs. So how has that changed over the last, say, 3 years? Particularly winter, I think, is when I'm curious to see what the difference winter over winter for the last, say 3, inclusive of the one we're currently in the middle of.
Okay, so I think I have enough on that one. Is there? I just want to make sure there are head nods on that one as well, or hand raises.
Let's do hand raises. Or in Commissioner Trieger's case and Commissioner Farr's case, thumbs up. Okay, you got Steve.
So we have those 2 assignments.
Okay. My understanding is there is no executive session this afternoon. Is that correct?
Correct.
Other business. Commissioners, any other business? We shall adjourn this meeting or recess this meeting, and we shall reconvene tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Thank you very much.